Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the discussion tonight. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come in. And we're just going to check out the social media pages here really quick, just to make sure everything's sharing. Looks like everything's sharing on Facebook. Just checking Twitter to make sure everything's sharing on Twitter. And just so everybody knows, you'll be able to comment, and I will see your comments pop up on the different channels, and I can respond to them. Generally, I'll probably try to respond to them specifically, but I will get to as many questions and comments as we have. The reason I wanted to do this, it's a federal election. Obviously, everybody is, or most people would be familiar with that. And there's a lot of issues that matter on the table for St. John. And for me, coming on board as a city councilor in the last 3 to 4 months, it's given me an opportunity to reflect on what's achievable for St. John. What are our ambitions? What do our ambitions look like through the lens of who the next federal government might be? And so what part of that means just having a good informed discussion about ideas that we want to do with all the federal candidates, I want to do with all the federal candidates. I should caveat this and say, look, this is not Brent Harris on behalf of City Council. I'm posting it through my councilor's page, but it is more of a personal engagement piece. This is stuff that when I was just a voter, I should say I am still just a voter, but when I was tracking along in campaigns in the past, I'd always looked for things like this, opportunities to see people have a discussion based on my local issues. And it wasn't always possible. And, you'd go and you'd try to meet the candidate, but those windows of time you get with a candidate can be short. So tonight we're hoping to spread this out for an hour and talk about some questions from the city council perspective. Like, we have issued a paper for the candidates to respond to. That will come later. We'll talk a little bit about that, but then just also issues that are on our radar here locally, questions that you may have emailed me before. And tonight we're going to be interviewing our first candidate, who was the first to get back to me about this and schedule time, is NDP candidate Don Paulin. So I'm going to bring him on here. And there we go. Hi there, Don. How you doing?
Good, Brent. How are you?
Good. As we were saying earlier, there's a lot of bald in this screen right now, but
there sure is.
We'll both agree that bald can be beautiful too. Let's say that much at least. So first off, congratulations on the candidacy, and welcome to the race.
Thank you.
How are you doing right now? How's this transition been? This is obviously, it wasn't a snap election, but it was certainly short. It's a short window of time. So how are you doing right now in this election?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is now is trying to get your message out to as many people as possible, and trying to engage with as many people as possible in such a short time frame. I really believe that there's no point in running for something if you're not going to listen to the people you're looking to represent. And that becomes increasingly difficult when the time that you have to work with is so significantly shorter than it should be.
Mm-hmm. And so what drew you to federal politics? What was it that, I know that you were involved provincially, and maybe give us a little bit of background about where you come from, what perspective you're bringing, and as well, what drew you into federal politics?
Well, I got into politics back. I would say I started getting interested in politics back during 2011, during the Orange Wave under Jack Layton. It was one of the first elections that I was old enough to actually vote in, and as such, it just became so unachievable for somebody like me. It seemed like, small town St. John, not really big name. I didn't come from a big name family. It just seemed so unachievable. And to watch Jack Layton's NDP kind of rip through the country like they did with such amazing policies, it was the first time in my life that I was able to really see a future for me, and politicians talking about things that I actually felt I could relate to. So bounce forward a little bit to last year. Our provincial snap election I jumped on board probably without too much insight, and bring us forward to today. And I believe that I need to get involved because it's the only way that I truly think that I can make a difference. I can get involved at local levels and stuff, but I've watched through 3 elections now, this being the third in 12 months, and I've watched the struggles of those candidates. I've watched the struggles of the people in our communities, relating to the different levels of government and the issues that they can address. And I just feel that you get to a certain point where the federal government has the top authority and everything has to trickle down. And so if you really want to make a difference in your community, you got to go to the top.
Right. Thank you for that. And what is it? What's your background? Give us a little bit about, you mentioned you were a St. Johnner. Yep. What is it that you do for a living, Don?
So actually for the past 10 years, I've worked in healthcare. I worked in psychiatric healthcare here in St. John. And most recently, while increasing my education in nursing, I actually work taking care of veterans at our Veterans Hospital. And it's just something that it felt right when I got into it. I also have a bit of a background in business. So I took some business education before I realized that the corporate world was not for me. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but I realized that after I had finished my piece of business education that it was not the best way that I could serve my community, is having that type of work. And so I decided to get into healthcare where I could really serve the people that I care about. Right.
That's great. No, thank you. And yeah, it's you're in that same boat as I am, where in the past 12 months, there have been 2 campaigns that you've had to be a part of. Yours is federal and provincial. Mine was provincial and municipal. So it's crazy to think about. I just thought about this today. If we get a majority government at the federal level, it will be next time around, there'll be 3 elections in the span of 8 months again for New Brunswick. And that is just a wild thought that I don't think anybody's looking forward to. But but it sounds to me like you're finding the campaign energizing. At least that's the gist I'm getting so far.
Absolutely. I mean, the big thing is, politics can be exciting, and not exciting because of what the individual candidates gain from it, but exciting because you just get to learn so much about the community that you live in. You get to learn from individuals that have experiences so much different than yours. And the big thing for me is I get to hear stories of individuals that have either struggled or succeeded under policies that, if elected, I can change. And it's really exciting. It makes it energizing. And just, I'm a real people person. So getting the opportunity to hear from people and converse with people and understand the different backgrounds that they come from. And it's just really, really an awesome opportunity, win or lose. Like it's just incredible to get to know the people in your own community.
Sorry about that. I'm the one who's not unmuting here now. It's down to me. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that's the case. It's a lot to undertake, and we're off to the races. So, Jagmeet Singh he has strong favorables as a leader. This is his second time around. This is also not your first rodeo. So I think we're all very much looking forward to having a conversation about some of these policies that you mentioned, because that's what matters, is how it trickles down to us here in St. John. Oftentimes, people get lost in the general differences, like we were talking about earlier, between, Section 91 of the Constitution, Section 92 of the Constitution, what the federal government does, what the provincial government does, and so it's always good for a refresher on that front, and for people to know, where those delineating lines are. So let's just jump right into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about right off the top was, in your opinion, and we're going to get to some specifics. We want to hit on the housing piece tonight. We want to hit on healthcare tonight, and we want to hit on climate change. in my opinion, and again, this is all just my opinion, but those are going to be the ballot box questions that people are going to ask. Climate change, healthcare, and housing. They're resounding pieces. Every platform, on the exception of the People's Party of Canada, have something to say about those three items, and all the main leaders have made major announcements about those pieces. But I wanted to hear from you first. You're somebody who studied that platform and policy, and you're also somebody who understands the local realities. So what is it that you think the city of St. John, and I should say John Rossi, of course, that's our riding, but what is it specifically that you think St. John needs from its next, whoever it will be? Certainly, obviously, you can speak from your own perspective, but whoever the next candidate is that gets to be our MP, what does our city need from them?
Well, Brent, the big thing for me is too many times we have politicians, be it federal, provincial, and unfortunately even municipal sometimes, that they pinpoint one topic, one issue, and that's just not what I'm going to do. The fact is, you can't just pinpoint one issue and go to bat 100% for that issue, because it doesn't diversify your representation of your public. And so I have kind of compiled my main goals in this election to be under the umbrella of affordability as a whole. I won't go too in depth because I'm sure you have questions that will kind of eat away at some of this. But affordability as a whole for me is making sure, just as, Jagmeet, I've had the opportunity to talk with him and understand kind of what his goals are for the country. But more so, I've been able to relate and understand what my goals are for this city and this riding. And affordability is top of mind for many people, be it the COVID-19 recovery and how we're gonna move forward from this. There's so many people that are still struggling, still out of work, and still just kind of coping with our new reality. We have a huge senior population here in the riding that are feeling extremely neglected for years and years and years. They have been bounced between conservative and liberal governments who have promised them things and then revoked them at the next government. It's been a real whirlwind for those folks. We have the highest child poverty rate in the entire country right here in our own city. That's devastating to think about. And then we can go into other things like affordable housing, how people can afford their health care, because the reality is universal health care in Canada doesn't mean universal. So when I want to pinpoint one specific thing that I'm looking to tackle in this election, it's affordability as a whole and not just one aspect of it. And then of course, the other two very important topics, such as the environment and the current climate crisis that we're in, that I just don't feel that many people are taking it, or as many as should, are taking it as the crisis that it is. I mean, we see out Western Canada, people being burned out of entire cities. Here in the province of New Brunswick, mass flooding for the past better part of 5 to 10 years and before, and it's just progressively getting worse and worse. I actually live just outside of a flood zone, and in those times, it's difficult for me to even get home. There's been times when I've had to stay in different locations for the night because I'm not able to reach my home. That is all about climate change, and I'm really about putting it at the forefront of everybody's mind that it needs to be addressed now, not in 10 years, not in 15 years, not by 2050. It needs to be addressed now. And no, we're not going to solve it overnight, but we need to put these plans into action. And then the third thing that you talked about is affordable housing, and that falls under my umbrella of affordability, and both at a federal level and at a riding level. There are so many things and why I'm so proud to be the NDP candidate for this riding is because there's so many things in our policy that, amazing leaders like Jagmeet and other members of parliament in the NDP caucus have constructed into our constitution and into our policy books. It's just, I'm really excited to be able to share them with you tonight, but I really need to reiterate that pinpointing one issue, under that affordability umbrella is not going to solve our problems. We need to look at things on a broader scheme.
Right. No, I think you make a good point about, the NDP have a fairly deep bench. You've got members like Charlie Angus who, fight for a number of issues, and quite valiantly so at that level. But yeah, no, thank you for that just summary of what it is you think the next, government for St. John, what we need out of the next government, because whenever we can hear that illustrated from our candidates, it allows us to go away, to think, and to come back with questions. So I hope that's what people who are watching tonight will do. Zero in, get involved with your campaign, talk with you, ask the questions, so that we can make the informed decisions, obviously. So we'll just jump to the next thing here. So you read the position paper that the city of St. John put out. Now, we passed that at council just last Monday. And it was an attempt based on our city staff and our council to get together and say, look, there's a lot of issues. There's no question. But from the perspective of St. John, here are some targeted pieces to that. I want to get into some more questions on that, specific to that. But I thought I'd start off with the question on that. What do you think, from your perspective, knowing the gaps that exist currently with our representation federally, knowing with where the federal party, the NDP, want to go with things, what do you think is an achievable win onto that position paper? What do you think is something we can really nail down? And I know, like you said, it's not just about one issue for sure, but if there is one or two things on there that you think, if we get an NDP government, or if we get an NDP who are controlling, who are in that position of power to keep the government, if it's a liberal minority, let's say again, looking at that position paper, what is something that we can get done fairly achievably?
For sure. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, Brent, was the increased population. It's been talked about for years now. Mayor Darling, in his term, really pushed for bringing people to our riding and growing our population, because population increases completely transcribe into economic increases. And so I really think it's so achievable, and it's so, with the right representation and the right message, it's so easy for all three levels of government to work together and be able to bring that population growth to our riding. We have a beautiful city. I don't have to tell you and anybody else on this stream that it's just a gorgeous city. We have things that are not seen anywhere else in our country or even in the world. And it's just, I've talked to many people over the past few weeks. One particular, I spoke to a physician who moved here only a few years ago, who moved here because of the beauty of the area, because of the multiculturalism of our city, and because of the language diversity that we have here. And it's just about implementing the correct method and about creating and sending out the right message. And that's really what I think is achievable. The most achievable in the city's document is about increasing population and newcomers.
Great. No, we put out some of that raw data, like you say, and the city, unless there's some major municipal reforms and tax reforms, the city, in order to kind of fit into its reality, does need to grow by 2,000 people a year, or just about. Now, what's interesting about that number is that those didn't come out of nowhere. What we did is the city, we looked at what is our structural deficit. So money coming in from tax revenue, money going out from expenses, aging infrastructure, all those things. So what is that deficit? And what we've looked at is, okay, if everything stayed the same, if we didn't get any different shake at it from the province, because the province of New Brunswick really does control and dictate what municipalities like St. John get to do on anything, what levers they have. It's shocking, some things that we have no control over, and it's also surprising some things that we do. But we won't get too far into that. But that population growth number has been, and it's coming out in an op-ed that I'm putting out this week. Don Mills and Herb Emery are two economists in this area, and taken a more of a deep dive into St. John's existing value proposition, like you talked about, our quality of life, current job vacancies, current expectation for industry growth or commercial growth, whatever area, and then current demand for services that exist. And they say that number is quite achievable. So we really have turned the corner in many ways as a city. And the immigration piece, like you mentioned, working with all three levels of government, it's only been very recent that we've had a provincial MLA who is actually St. John Harbour's riding MLA, and she has just been put into that position just 6 months ago, or what is it? I guess we're a year ago now. Oh my goodness, a year ago, to work across those lines. And so St. John has an excellent newcomer group within the city. We have YMCA doing work. I really believe, and I agree with you, that we are positioned well to take on more immigrants. So no, thank you for that response, and definitely noted on population growth. And just want to jump on here to the next one. So when it comes to one of the pieces in the position paper, and I'll flag this, and I don't know if there's any comment you have on it. The city of St. John didn't get any of the federal government's what is it? I'm trying to remember the federal program, but it was aimed at transit and reimbursing cities that struggled due to COVID through major losses to their revenue stream from transit. We didn't get any transfers, mostly because the provincial government of New Brunswick is the only province that doesn't provide transfers to its cities for their transit. So it was almost like a program that was never able or never qualifiable for the city of St. John. We didn't get that. There were some other programs that we didn't get as well. And then beyond that, there's programs that really would work in tandem with what our priorities are. But the problem is the federal government, in many of its programs, whether it be for greening infrastructure or greening fleets or building infrastructure or you name it, any one of those federal programs out there to support population growth, business, you name it, they don't allow them to be stacked. So if you qualify for one, that's it. You don't get the other one that maybe it relates to. Is that something that you think, have you heard anything from the federal party on that? I know the Federation of Canadian Municipalities just came out and really hammered on that point and said, look, municipalities, especially small to mid-sized cities, need to be able to stack these programs because they usually have multiple pieces of it happening at the same time. And I'm just curious if that's something that you think is achievable, that the NDP could push for, that you're aware of, or if there's any comment from the party's perspective on that piece.
So when you're talking about the actual barriers that currently exist, we as a party don't have a specific platform on those particular programs. However, breaking down barriers is what New Democrats do. We did it with universal healthcare when it was first implemented by Tommy Douglas, and we've tried to implement it going forward with things like universal pharmacare, universal dental care, universal basic incomes, and the whole thing about you asking, is it achievable? It's absolutely achievable. Anything is achievable if we have the right people doing the job and if we have the right managing of our funds and our tax dollars. I hear all the time about, how are we going to afford all these things? How is the federal government? How is the municipal government? How is the provincial government going to afford all these things? And in many cases, not all, but in many cases, we already have the funds. We already have them sitting around somewhere. It's just a matter of allocating them to the correct areas and making sure that the correct individuals, the people who need it the most, are getting it. And, I'll give you one instance. You mentioned.
Oh, we lost you there. You just muted.
Sorry about that.
You're back.
Warned you.
Yeah.
So I'll just talk to one topic that you just mentioned there, public transit, and about how St. John's public transit system did not receive the influx of cash that other jurisdictions received. And the fact is, no, we don't have a policy specifically speaking to municipal programs. However, when we're talking about transit as a whole, we have it right in our policy that our plans is to modernize and expand public transit within and between communities across Canada. So that means municipalities like St. John will have the benefit of a transit system without the cost associated to their bottom dollar. It will come from federal dollars. It will come from the federal government, rather than reaching out and giving money to organizations and institutions and corporations that are paying billions and billions of dollars in either, cash bonuses or in, CEO wages. We plan to take that money and redirect it. Those subsidies we plan to redirect into programs such as affordable transit for municipalities. And we really want to build on the deficit that was left from the disbanded Greyhound routes here in New Brunswick and across the country. We have a zero emission buses and electric transit by 2030 that we plan to, in this program, we plan to establish. And for municipalities that identify it as a priority, we plan to help them build fare free transit. And what that means for those of you that are listening, that doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are going to go up. It doesn't mean that we're going to have to take from our healthcare system or from our public defense or anything like that. What it means is we're going to invest the money that has been wasted elsewhere to benefit the individuals in our communities, not just here in St. John Rothesay, but across our country. And transit is I would even argue that it's a human right at this point, just like things, and many will argue with me, but things like access to internet. We are in a totally different world now, especially since the pandemic has hit, where we need these things. If we want to encourage population growth and we want to encourage economic growth, we need to look at breaking down the barriers that restrict these things. We need to look at making sure that living in St. John is not only affordable as it pertains to things like housing and availability, but that people can get from their housing to their work, that we are investing in our communities and building infrastructure to create green jobs during this transition from an oil and gas-based economy to other aspects of power. And, St. John's a great place to be able to do that. We are the one, I believe we're the only one in Canada, at least, that has the Tesla Power Hub. It's just, we have so much opportunity here. And if the focus was put where it needs to be, we could flourish. And Brent, the transit that I just talked about is really just only one aspect of it. But we have these things in our policy. These are the things that New Democrats are fighting for. These are the things that, if elected, and even if I'm not elected, that I will be fighting for, because they are a necessity in order to grow as a community.
Right. No, I think that the NDP definitely have a number of things in the policy that would be interesting for our city to look at, and to hopefully benefit from. It's one of those things that, as a councillor, I look at this and I say, man, how does our city council talk directly and work directly with the federal government more often? Because in many cases, we have a provincial government that just ignores certain aspects of what it means to be an urban reality. And I've said this to people before, if you put the city of St. John in any other province, our budget grows significantly, all things equal. And that's that's quite telling. The province really, it approaches things from a rural perspective, in my opinion. And I know lots of people who live in rural communities disagree with me on this. But, anybody who looks at New Brunswick from a systems perspective walks away thinking, my goodness, this looks like a rural royal mess. And those are quoted words from people who have sat down and looked at how municipalities exist, LSDs exist, and there's just no other province or territory that works this way. I shouldn't say that about territories. Territories are quite different. But no, it's a great thing. It's a great piece for sure on transit. I guess the question I would have is, how do we work directly with the federal government when we have a province that doesn't recognize some of these things? And that, I think, it's a bit of a nuanced question, and I'm not really sure you can answer it. I get your point. I take your point that it matters who's at the table. and what the person at the table is willing to fight for as our member of parliament. And that's certainly true. And I guess the practicality of how do we circumvent some of these failings that hem us in as a city, that's maybe a question for a different time. Maybe we'll circle back to that, but I'll leave us with that. I see there's quite a few people here who have commented on the housing piece. I see Jennifer Walshotowitz. She's commented on that from a newcomer's perspective and population growth, that this is an area that is between employment and housing that there needs to be supports for. I know AJ Arsenault commented on that, and a few others. So what I wanted to do is just move this slightly as a conversation toward housing, which I think will be one of the ballot box questions, if not the ballot box question for some people coming into this. It's no secret that St. John's housing market has done quite well in the last 18 months. And it was on a slow trajectory rise before that, but especially since last January, things have really pumped up. And so within that, the NDP have an interesting platform on housing, and I've taken the time to try to familiarize myself with all the parties' platforms on this. And one of the things in there is a commitment to building, and I want you to talk about the rest of the platform, but I do want us to circle back to this commitment to build 500,000 new homes for affordable homes. What does that mean? Who is it that would qualify for these affordable homes? What does that price range look like? And then furthermore, this is the practical question. How do we build them? Because every contractor I know in the city, and the city of St. John is hitting a home run this year. If all the work that's supposed to be finished by the contractors who have permits are finished by December, like they're supposed to be, we'll have 500 new units on the market. That's the first time St. John's put out that big of a number ever, to my knowledge, at least since we've been tracking that kind of data. So, and right now, every construction company and contractor is maxed, trying to keep up with that and turning down work quite often. So that's a question I have there is, I really appreciate that attention to detail that the NDP have here to promote this from an affordable perspective for affordable housing, and also to nonprofits and cooperative housing, which the other parties don't mention. But who's going to build them? And how do you see that trickling down? And how do you see your role as potentially our next MP in quarterbacking some of that?
Absolutely. So I just want to jump back to something that you had mentioned. You had spoke a little bit about jurisdiction, and jurisdiction comes into a whole realm of conversations at the federal and provincial level. We hear all the time, we can't do this because it's not our jurisdiction. Provincial can't do this because it's federal jurisdiction. And the reality is, respectfully so, jurisdiction is a reality, but it only becomes a complication if we allow it to be a complication. And the fact is, if I'm elected, am I going to be the same color as our provincial government? No, I'm not. Am I going to have the same goals as our provincial government? I hope so. And that's what's in the best interest of New Brunswickers and for people in St. John Ross. But like I said, jurisdiction only becomes an issue if we allow it to be an issue, because if the right people are at the table, as I've mentioned before, you can sit down. You can come to terms with the realities that you're facing, and you can, from different aspects, different levels of government, you can contribute to building a better community. And so when I hear jurisdiction used as a excuse, I just laugh at it, because can I come in and change our education system as a federal member of parliament? Absolutely not. Does that mean that I can't advocate and I can't pressure our provincial government to change things for the better? And do I have a stronger voice as a member of parliament than others in our community? Absolutely. Can I demand that our federal government put pressure on people? If I have that authority given to me on September 20th, I absolutely can. So again, jurisdiction is only a complication if we allow it to be. Now, going directly to your question about housing. 500,000 houses, that yeah, it doesn't seem like a whole lot when you look over 13 provinces and territories, but it is because we have tangible ways to achieve it. When it comes to building these affordable housing and making sure that we have the contractors and the constructions to the contractors and the construction workers to be able to do this, and the tradespeople, reaching out to nonprofit. I mean, you yourself, you operate a organization that helps people learn. And one of the big things on the NDP platform, kind of veering off from housing a little bit, is our education policies and making sure that education is available to anybody who seeks it. A lot of people who are going into the trades, they're deterred from it because, well, they just don't see it as a viable option. Or for many, they're older and they don't feel that it's worth getting into. They're scared about starting their own, construction companies or their own trades companies. And we need to break down the barriers so that we can get more people into these fields, so that we can give more people access to learn the skills to be able to then put those skills to work in our own communities, such as building affordable housing. So, one thing that Jagmeet has just spoken about as he's traveling across the country, I know, as somebody who has recently been in education, that the fears of student debt can prevent somebody from, pursuing their dreams. That dream may be to be a carpenter, to be a plumber, to be an electrician, to be a general contractor. And we're holding these individuals back. We're holding progress back and available skills back from our communities by not breaking down the barrier that is student debt. So that's one thing that we can do to encourage a stronger population of tradespeople to be able to build these units. Now, when it comes to affordable, the big thing with the NDP's policy versus a lot of other parties' policies is what is affordable? What is affordable? Does it mean sticking a group of individuals in a home or in an apartment complex or in a unit complex and then neglecting it? No, that's not it. Affordable means that we're going to not only prepare a home for these individuals, and we're going to make it affordable so that they can continue living there, but we're going to break down the systemic issues around it as well. We're going to break down the view that affordable housing means that it's just poor people. It's just a poverty-stricken neighborhood. We need to look at diversifying the population in our areas. In St. John, we are very, very segregated. I'm sure you know this, that we have sections in St. John, and then we have sections in Rothesay, and they're completely two different financial means within those households. And not saying that there's not a mix of each in each community, but we really need to look at the bigger picture, as I mentioned before, and that is making sure that these affordable housing units are going to be affordable going forward. Are people going to be able to get to their employment? Are people going to have, programs in place such as universal basic incomes, dental care, things like that, to not only decrease the amount that they're paying out in housing, but to make sure that they're also financially contributing to the communities that they're residing in. It puts more money in the pockets of the individuals that reside within our cities, reside within our towns, and it gives them more buying power. So, to bring this all to a point, affordable housing is 100% being focused on by the New Democratic Party.
Oh, you just went. There you go.
It is also a focus of mine as someone who's running to be the member of parliament for St. John Rothesay. But it's not just about building the houses. It's about being there for the individuals who will live in those houses and making sure that they're supported through the transitions, making sure that they're going to be able to afford them going forward, making sure that we're not only building these houses, but we're caring for these units. We're making sure that people aren't living in squalor and that we're not creating, in a sense, and pardon the term, ghettos, because it does nobody any good. It doesn't do good for our neighborhoods. It doesn't do good for our city as a whole. So affordability when it comes to housing needs to be looked at on a grander scheme.
Yeah, it is interesting to me to see, so many big promises from the other parties, and certainly we're going to interview them, and I'm going to put the same question to them as I did you. How are you going to build $1.4 million if you're the Liberals, 1.4 million homes, or if you're the Conservatives, 1 million, when we have a backlog in this country of homes waiting to be built or units waiting to be constructed in the tune to 1 million. Supply just cannot keep up with the demand. And I'm not sure how throwing more money at it is going to solve it. But one of the wedge pieces I see here between parties, and again, I'm not saying this, to play favorites or anything, but one of the wedge pieces is, who do we empower to build these homes? And what I appreciated about the NDP platform was that piece that you talked about. We want nonprofits, housing cooperatives, and others to be able to do that. In most places in this country, the majority of rental housing was created in the 70s and 80s. And it came out of a completely different mantra of federal and provincial involvement on the topic. After the war, and we had baby boomers, and the population just exploded. And one of the ways they did that was through housing cooperatives, empowering people to take charge, community groups. And ever since the 80s, they've all been forgotten. It's very hard to start one. Our group has tried to start one here in St. John, and it takes a lot of money. Unless you've gotten an angel investor, or a bank's never going to lend to you. It's not a thing. Nonprofits don't get to borrow from banks. We have no securable assets in many cases, so that doesn't work. And then so you're back to fundraising. You're going to try to go raise $60,000 to buy a building, and then put your group into it. It's a very tall order. And what I appreciated about the NDP's platform was that it mentions that specifically. And I believe that number of 500,000 affordable units, when put through the lens of diversifying who can participate. It's not just big construction companies. It's not just investors like, real estate investment trusts, REITs, they call them. It really is the grassroots of our community. So, it's definitely a great piece for the NDP. And I think from my perspective here in St. John, I see that empowering groups like, the St. John Nonprofit Housing. Mm-hmm. We've got, there's actually a cooperative housing unit that still exists here in the city, still a housing co-op. There's a St. John Land Bank. The St. John Loan Fund is amassing a funding for this. So there really is some on the ground stuff that we could benefit from.
So I just want to, can I ask you something, Brent? Yeah. You talk about a lot of these organizations, and it just brings a question to mind that I like to ask people. Is it really for the community if the community is not involved in it? And that's the big thing about most of the NDP's platform. And most of what we're talking about here tonight is, like you said, engaging the nonprofits, the people who are on the ground working with our community members, the people who are doing the grunt work day in and day out to make sure that things are getting better in our own community, in our own neighborhoods, in our own cities. And it doesn't make sense to me, nor does it in line with our policy, is to create these buildings, to create these to create these organizational fundings without engaging with the public and without allowing the communities to take part in it. Communities that build communities take pride in them. And that's the thing, right? Is making sure that we're not only creating places for people to live, but we're also creating jobs. We're also creating a place for people to be proud of. And if we engage the nonprofit organizations and the local entrepreneurs and the local tradespeople to build these houses and to get involved in the growth in our city, not only are we going to create a beautiful city, but we're also going to create a beautiful community. We're going to create a place where people interact with each other on a respectful level. We're going to create a place where people take pride in the way that our city looks. We're going to create an organizational entity that truly personifies the term community. And that's the big thing, is making sure we're engaging all players at the table.
Do you think that's going to come through CMHC? Has the NDP, have you been a part of anything where the NDP has laid out who's going to spearhead that? Or is there going to be a different, I'm just trying to remember where I saw this. I don't know if you can remember, you commented on it. One party, and I don't remember if it was the Greens or if it was the NDP or the Liberals, who it was one of those three for sure. One of the things they talked about was creating a new minister's role at the federal level and potentially letting that trickle into a new slew of programs that would be parallel to CMHC, what they already do. I'm curious, has the NDP talked about how we're going to get that money out? Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, it was our policy that you were probably reading, which is creating an entity at the federal level that is going to oversee all this, that's going to be able to reach out to these communities and engage and bring back to Parliament, what needs to be done to move forward with these plans, what's going to be needed, in regards to manpower, in regards to affordability, in regards to costing. And that's the thing. No one person, we've seen for too many years that the Blues and the Reds, they think that they have all the answers, but the reality is nobody has all the answers. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. I sure as heck don't want to speak for Jagmeet, but I'm sure he would admit he also does not have all the answers. But to solve these problems, we need to find the people that do. We need to receive engagement. We need to receive feedback from the communities that these are going to impact the most. And by creating that entity within Parliament, we will create a structure where we will have that. We will have the input from, because every community is different, right? St. John is different from Toronto. Toronto is different from Vancouver, and so on and so forth. And then you bring Indigenous communities into the mix, and it becomes completely all over the board. We need an entity to be able to bring all voices to the table and be able to bring all information to the table so that it can be looked at from a broader viewpoint.
Right. No, it's good. I'm just going to take a peek back here at some of these comments. There's a bunch here that I wanted to get to. I think AJ Arsenault is going to get our spokesperson of the night award. She's very active on here. She's not alone. But kudos to you, AJ, for chiming in. I see Reg back here. He said he picked up on your point about where was that? I gotta go find. There it is, about student debt. He said, it's scary. Student debt has to be addressed. Both my kids are in their late 30s and still paying. I am one of those kids in their not late 30s, in my early 30s, I guess, and I'm still paying. So is my wife. You are too, I guess, Don. I see you raising your hand. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. I see Mackenzie got a question here. I'm going to park that question till later, Mackenzie. We've got a couple other here we're going to get to, but it's a good question. So I don't see any other major questions. Just lots of good comments. So thanks you. So far, we've had probably around 26 people, just unique people showing up on my feed anyway here that have come. We've got about 10 in there right now who are watching live with us, which is great. This will obviously exist online afterwards. It'll be permanent and we can share it and people can watch it later. So next little round of questions. We hit the housing piece. So right now, my family, for example, I got 3 kids. It's me and my wife. We don't have a family doctor, and we had one, and that family doctor moved on for whatever reason. And so we've been back to square one, and we waited for 2 years to get a family doctor, and we had one for about a year, and now we're back on a waiting list for over a year. Every single time something comes on the radio about ERs closing down, and Don, I know you know this best because you work in the industry. You are on the front lines. And I meant to say this earlier, but thank you so much for all of your service to our community over this past year. It's been a crazy time to be a nurse and working in the healthcare sector. And so certainly from my perspective, I want to give thanks whenever I can for that level of service because it's above and beyond. And to all your colleagues working in Horizon Health for sure. But beyond that, where do you think we're falling down? We always talk about, Blaine Higgs has now said, I'm going to have an answer for you guys in 3 weeks on how we're going to get this done, right? Where are we falling down and what is the federal government's role in this? Yeah, go ahead. I'll leave it there.
Well, I think you know me well enough to know that a lot of my focus, especially when it comes to healthcare, is in regards to the healthcare workers. Not just because I am one, but because I've seen for the better part of 10 years, what these folks go through on a day-to-day basis. And I think in the climate that we're currently in, when it comes to our current nursing crisis, healthcare, reforms, emergency rooms shutting down. The reality is we don't have what we need to retain the staff. And we're kind of veering off into provincial territory when I start talking about livable wages and such like that for healthcare workers specifically, because they are currently at the table, many bargaining with our provincial government. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes down to it, we are the lowest paid healthcare workers in the entire country. And that even extends to places like PEI, who have a much lower population than us. It doesn't make sense to me that we're talking about retaining healthcare workers, we're talking about training new nurses, we're talking about training new LPNs, new PSWs, and other members of the very, very needed healthcare teams in our hospitals, and yet we're driving them out to work other places. We need a federal government that's going to pressure our provincial government to make sure that these people are in line with the rest of the country, so that we're not losing nurses, we're not losing healthcare workers to other parts of the province. Now, on the doctor side of things, I actually spoke with a family physician the other day. This physician will actually be leaving New Brunswick in 11 days. 11 days. We're about to lose a family physician with 6,000 patients right here in our own municipality. I won't name the physician. However, it all has to do with barriers. It all has to do with not taking care of the people that take care of us. And it's not all about wages. People think that it's all about the wages. It's, doctors want more money, nurses want more money, but it's not about the money all the time. Yes, we need a livable wage. Yes, we need to ensure that our federal governments are funding our healthcare system so that wage bargaining is never a matter of can we afford it. But the big thing is making sure that we're supported. I'll share a very, very brief story about this family physician. So this physician has their own healthcare issues or their own personal health issues. And in the province of New Brunswick, which I will extend is the only province in all of Canada that has this policy, their ability, a family doctor's ability to bill Medicare, is specifically tied to their privileges through the health authority. So for those who don't really understand what that means, every doctor within the province has the ability to bill Medicare for their services. But those abilities to bill Medicare for their services are directly tied to their connection with the health network, be it Vitality or Horizon Health. This particular physician is not able to do physician rounds, because of a medical condition at the hospital, but is able to fulfill the duties of a family physician. Sit in an office, be able to assess patients, be able to diagnose, treat, send them to specialists, admit them to hospital, and so on and so forth. So this physician attended a meeting with our Minister of Health, our provincial Minister of Health, and said, I'm being told that if I don't do my rounds, if I'm not doing, the requirements under the provincial health policy, I'm not able to bill Medicare, which means, in short, I'm not able to be a physician in the province anymore. And our provincial government turned their back on this physician and said, sorry, there's nothing we can do, that's policy. And in the same sense, the physicians are scared to speak out in many cases because of our provincial government and because of federal policies. And so now we're losing an amazing family physician to Edmonton, strictly because we can't take care of our own healthcare workers. So going back to how federal can support this situation is by implementing higher funding to the province, by implementing more restrictions on the provincial government when it comes to where our healthcare dollars are spent, such as making sure that they're funneling money into our mental health system, into addictions, into our emergency rooms, into training and retention, into fair wages that are in line with the rest of the country. And we need to put more restrictions on our Health Canada or our Health Canada money transfers that are coming from the federal government. For example, we withheld money from the provincial government, we being the federal government, because of their choice to not fund the out-of-hospital abortions, or to, in short, not really that, but to make sure that abortion access is available throughout the province, and it was deemed they weren't. But our provincial government decided to stand and turn their backs anyway. So we're kind of getting a blur between provincial and federal jurisdiction there. But as I said before, jurisdiction is only a problem if you allow it to be a problem. And our health system at a federal level has more power than they're implementing at this current moment. And the last thing is, I can go back to my previous statement when it comes to student debt. I'm a healthcare worker that's looking to pursue my education and increase my status, increase my role within the healthcare network. And one of the most terrifying things about it is not being able to afford my livelihood and pay my rent, pay my mortgage, being able to afford transportation and groceries and medications while I'm attending school. If we can break down the systemic barriers that are restricting people from entering these fields, while also breaking down the barriers that are causing people not to be retained within these fields, such as wages, security, safety, and in many cases, unfortunately, it comes down to a lot to do with discrimination within our province as well. I faced it myself within our healthcare system. We're never going to fix the problem. So we need to fix it from both ends. We need to fix it on the retention end, and how can we better support these workers and doctors? And we need to fix it on the training end, and how can we encourage more people to enter that workforce? How can we encourage more people to enter the health sector and be able to afford pursuing that education? You stop and think, doctors go to school for anywhere between 10 to 14 years. I don't know anybody, I'm not sure if you do personally, that can afford to not be paid for 10 to 14 years. That's absolutely ridiculous. We need to create programs such as, what our current programs are, like TSD. And the NDP has stood and said, we will change the EI program to make sure that people have a livable wage, or a wage in general, while they're going to school. We will break down and remove student debt from individuals who are pursuing education at a higher learning. These are big things in any sector, but none so much as in the healthcare sector, where we have 900, just in our province, 900 nursing positions that are currently vacant. That's terrifying. That is terrifying to think that some of our hospitals, our major hospitals, the biggest hospital in this entire province, our teaching hospital, the St. John Regional, is closing emergency rooms. Not our emergency room specifically, but they're at risk of long wait times, and other jurisdictions are closing emergency rooms because we just don't have the staff. That's terrifying. And we need to, as a federal government, we need to fix these issues twofold.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to be able to accuse you of not having some mastery over that portfolio, Don. That was, a very good high-level assessment, and thank you for that. I do want to be cognizant of our time. Obviously, this will be a living thing. People can comment on it. I'm sure you'll circle back and chime in on any questions that from this video. But I do want to get to our last one, and this is another one of those ballot box questions. And it comes down to climate change. And the way I've worded this question is this: the climate change is top of mind for almost all Canadians. And many Canadians are patiently waiting for the government to lead us into a more ambitious plan to reduce emissions and create local sustainability. So what does that look like from the NDP's platform? What is it that how do you see yourself fighting for that?
Well, I have to reference the other parties and some of their statements. The Liberals are now extending it to 2050, that we're going to hit their targets. We hear a lot that we're right on track, but on track to what? We're already in the emergency. I mentioned this to you before. Planning for 25, 30 years down the road is not enough. We need to act now. And some of the things that our party is looking to implement if we make government is by setting that strong target of 50% emission reductions by 2030. Working with provinces with infrastructure and the abilities that they already have to create active transport, to create a local economy that doesn't rely on shipping things out of country or importing things into country. And I know that's not always a possibility in this current economic situation that we're in, especially with COVID, but we need to start looking at these solutions now. People don't think about how much it actually affects our environment just importing things and exporting things when we could be utilizing our own resources right here in our own country. And things like we plan to have 100% only electric vehicles on the market by 2035. Zero emission by 2035 vehicles are the only ones that will be sold on the market by 2035. Plus, we plan to have them built here. We have incentives of up to $15,000 per family if you purchase one of these vehicles that are Canadian made. So not only are we trying to create a long-term solution with electric vehicles, and I am only speaking about vehicles right now, but we're also trying to increase the economy. That's the way that New Democrats are not only looking to combat climate change, but create real, good-paying, strong green jobs in the process. Because that's the big issue with attacking climate change right now, is getting the buy-in from some of these individuals, by some of the organizations that are terrified because for their entire lives they've been working in an industry that has not supported the changing climate, that has not protected our environment, and they don't know how to transition. We need to make sure that not only are we going to say that we're going to lower these emissions, that we're going to create green jobs, but they need to be easily transferable to the workers that are already in our oil and gas industry. And the other thing that I'll mention just in brief, because it has been very much publicized, is Jagmeet has said, the NDP caucus has said, if elected, we're going to end these subsidies that are going to oil and gas industries that are not helping our environment. If anything, they are encouraging more pollution. They are encouraging more pollution because we are propping up these organizations rather than we could be funneling that money into the green transition, funneling workers into educational programs so that they can stop working in oil and gas and can be working in things like hydroelectricity, can be working in the building of electric vehicles, can be working in solar energy. It is very possible to have both. And I get very, very upset personally when I hear the Conservatives and the Liberals back and forth saying it's one or the other. We either have an economy or we save the environment. And the reality of the situation is we can have both. The NDP has a plan to have both, and we have costed it out and have a step-by-step instruction on how we can achieve both. And it starts from the bottom up. It starts from investing in the workers and making sure that they can transition to a green economy, and making sure that those green jobs transition into zero emissions. And it's just as simple as that.
Don, that was a really good tie-in there, and it's never been more clear to me how that narrative fits within the NDP, within that messaging and within the narrative that the NDP have. You know, of course, NDP having come out of a real strong workers movement in the West, but seeing what you're tying in there, you know, I actually tweeted about this today, and you know, I said we've got maybe 150,000 oil and gas industry sector workers that are going to need to transition in the next 5 years out of that sector, 10 years at the very most. And we've got 1.5 million houses that need to be built to meet up with supply or demand. That sounds like a very good value proposition. I'm seeing that tie in there between what you're talking about, this ground up approach, focusing on the workers so we get the right industries, so that we get the result and the outcome of reducing greenhouse gases and tackling climate change. So thank you for that. And I am cognizant, we said we wanted to be an hour. We are at 1 hour and 3 minutes, so pretty good on the nose. We've been all over the place for viewership, but it's great to have the 7 or 8 of you right now who are viewing, and thank you for that. And I'll just end with this, and I think this is a great one because you kind of answered it. And this is one of the questions, one of the bigger questions that was asked right here in one of our comments. By a local entrepreneur, Mackenzie Tregeson. He said, what's the federal NDP party's policy on sustainable agriculture going forward? As it sits, there's virtually no funding available at the provincial or federal level for anything other than conventional agriculture in a province that only grows 8% of its own fruits and vegetables. And I'll just caveat that and say, Mackenzie is working on an aquaponics design build right here in the city to grow a substantial amount of vegetables and fruits right here, greenhouse kind of buy in there, and he's had a very difficult time trying to get that off the ground. But what I heard you say, and I'll let you end with it, but what I heard you say was interesting because the NDP want to look at that repatriating supply lines idea of saying, what do we bring in from out of country right now, and how do we do that here, and what do the incentives need to be to make that a viable product here? So I see the tie-in, but I'll let you take the question as well.
Absolutely. So again, it really just goes back to specifically speaking as an NDP candidate. You know, I already said, do I have all the answers? Absolutely not. And climate change is something that, though it's happening now, we are still getting more and more data. The scientific minds, Brent, that are working on combating climate change are just, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. And the ideas are just so broad. And some of them are just absolutely amazing. I wish I had their minds. And this is just one more thing that, do I have a specific statement on this matter? No, I don't, because there's so many things coming up. And the one thing that I can say is, if I'm your MP, if I'm the person who's going to be fighting in Ottawa for this riding, these are the things that I want to hear about. These are the things that I will take to Ottawa, that I will bring into the House of Commons, and we will lay it on the table and say, is this a tangible option? How can we support this person? Not just this person, but all other persons that fall under the same intellect, the same sector. How can we support the people who are supporting us? And that's my big mission statement, is making sure that those who support me get the support right back. And, again, I can't speak specifically to this circumstance, but the big thing is being a party that's open to criticism, being a party that is open to new ideas, and working with the communities that we're looking to represent to bring those new ideas forward, to create a future, not only for St. John Rothesay, but for all Canadians, that is sustainable, financially stable, and more so just there. If we keep going on the trail that we're going on, we're not going to have a future. And so we need really strong individuals in Ottawa that are going to close their mouth, open their ears, and listen to the minds that are coming forward with some of these ideas, and find policies and programs that we can implement to support individuals like Mackenzie, like his agriculture plans and organization and company, and really just keep an open mind that we don't have all the answers. And so we need to be listening to the professionals and those that have knowledge in these fields, so that we can find the solution.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank you again so much, Don, for making yourself available. To everybody who's viewing at home, again, this is going to be shareable. It's going to be online. By all means, reach out to Don's campaign, candidate for the NDP here in St. John Rothesay. And we'll be interviewing candidates going forward. Any of the candidates who come back and get back to me. Obviously, Don was the first. And so kudos to you on that. I've got Wayne, I believe Wayne Long set up next for us on Thursday. So we'll be putting the word out for that. And yeah, we'll be seeing everybody soon. And hopefully everybody has a good night.
Perfect. And Brent, if I could just throw in one last thing. Anybody who wants to reach out to the campaign or has questions going forward that they haven't shared tonight, we are completely open. We always try to get back to people as soon as we can, and we'll never turn down a constructive conversation. So our campaign phone number, 506-608-7515. You can reach us by email at campaignCentral@don.pollen@ndp.ca, or you can reach out to us at either Twitter or Facebook at Your Voice Tavoix. That's YOURVOICE TAVOIX. And you can reach out to us at any of those means. We'll always try to get back to you. So thank you very much for having me, Brent, and I hope you have a great night.
Awesome. Thank you, Don.